Hi friends, if you're like me, you're drinking Pedialyte because you're constantly dehydrated. Hydration, but make it cute. Or you're a photographer that wants to talk about using gels with flash. That sounds like you, we should talk. We are finally making this video. I asked you guys to vote on topics. All of them got votes. A couple people specifically messaged me and said also, yes, please talk about gels. So we're gonna talk about gels. If you are totally unfamiliar with gels, that's fine. I work with almost nobody that ever uses them and they can be used in a lot of different ways, but this is what a gel is. It is not jelly at all. It is a little light thing that goes over your flash. I used to use it a lot more back when I was using the Canon speed lights because they're shaped like this. And the gels that I have are shaped like this, and it's perfect. I have switched over to Godex, and I have another video that's all about how I use bounce lighting for receptions, and so I will link you to that below. But whenever I switched to the Godex, which is super cheap, I stopped using gels because these just didn't fit on this, so there was always like a weird blue cast that came out. So I haven't used gels in years, but there are a lot of times where they would have came in handy, and so I'm gonna talk about the utilitarian uses for gels today. So I have this little pack of gels by Rogue, and it has a bunch of different stuff categorized in there. Everything from green filters to tungsten filters to a couple blue filters, but mostly a bunch of tungsten filters. And gels exist for you to put on your flash to change the color temperature of your flash. This one says that it takes my flash from 6500K to 3200K. So this is going to match a lot of ambient tungsten lighting that will exist in venues. And this will help to make your light match the same light as the room that you're in whenever it's mostly lit with tungsten. So today we're going to talk about how to use them, why you might want to use them, and why you might not want to use them. So first I'm going to show some examples. This is a picture that was taken by my second shooter who did not have gels on her flash. So the background is yellow and the foreground is cooler. You can see that everybody in the background is orange. They are being primarily lit not by her blue colored flash, but by the tungsten colored bulbs that are in the room. So everybody in the background is orange. I was using gels at this wedding, so even though my flash source is still a little bit blue and we can see some yellow in the background, it is primarily matching the ambient lighting of the room, so the background isn't that warm. And this is an example of all ambient lighting. So I'm only using the tungsten lighting and I have color corrected for their skin, and the lighting mostly ends up being more neutral. So gels are really great at taking a situation where it's really warm. You can add light, and our flashes are a more blue light, and trying to equalize with the light in the room a little bit more so that your flash is more harmonious with the lighting in the room. And one of the reasons that I don't really use gels that often is because I kind of like the look. I kind of like it when the background is orange. I feel like whenever I color correct, it just warms up the room entirely, where arguably, even though the lighting was at its warmest in this ambient lighting where there's almost no blue lights, in order for me to color correct it and have it look correct to my eye, it's going to be a cooler looking image overall. We don't really have that blue lighting from our flash to compare it to. And all of these examples are quite a few years old, but I really wanted to show you a couple more. This is an example from a second shooter that was taken inside of a tent. So we were bouncing off of a very white light source. And you can see in the background as we go further into the back that those string lights are an orange color in the background. And you can see that my camera and my flash has a little gel on it. So I was taking a photo of this same thing a minute later, and this is what we get. The gel has my flash color matching almost perfectly with the string lights in the background, which makes them look cooler as a result, and everything feels more harmonious in the photo. Here's another example of the same thing. This is my second shooter who is not using a gel in her flash, just standard flash. And you can see that the lighting in the background is very orange. The people in the background are very orange, but I was using a gel at this wedding. So my end result is that everything looks a lot cooler as a result. So reasons that you might want to use gels. I would say that there have been times where I desperately wish that I had broken out a green gel more than anything for things like fluorescent lighting. And for the most part, when I think of how to use gels, I'm thinking about them in terms of color correction, not ways to use them creatively. So for the most part, when I think about gels, when they're useful and how to use them, I think about like this wedding, for example. This is a room that was incredibly yellow and a little bit more green, and you can kind of see that the lighting in the background ends up being even more yellow and even more green as a result. It sounds like it would be counterintuitive to add green whenever you're seeing the lighting is also green, but this is the way that I should have color corrected for that. If I would have added a green light source, then whenever I went to select on like a neutral white color and did my color correction later, it all would have ended up evening out in the end. The background wouldn't have looked more green by comparison to the blue. It wouldn't have ended up looking more green it would have turned my blue light source to a more green color, which would have meant that I would have evened things out in post. By introducing an ungelled flash, which is naturally a cooler color, I was not giving myself the ability to be able to bring those colors back. So if the ambient light source in the room is green and you would like for it not to be, the trick is to use a gel. So in the same way that you're in a room that has naturally very orange lights, by adding an orange gel to your flash, you are matching the ambient lighting and making less contrast between your flash color and the room color, and so it all ends up evening out in the end. He's having a bad dream. Just gonna watch him sleep, buddy. So basically, when it comes to color correcting for a room, if you've ever been in a situation where you're like, the lighting in this room is a terrible color, the answer is that you have to become a part of that horrible color. You have to become a part of the problem. I have shot with videographers that whenever they brought out their LED light, it was still bright blue in comparison to what I was doing with my flash. The blue one, I only think that it would have ever came in handy one time, and I was working with a videographer who brought in this very cool toned light. It wasn't blue, it was just probably the same color as my flash, or what my flash would have been if I were using direct flash, but I was in an all wooden room and I was using bounce flash, and whenever you're using bounce flash, the color that you are bouncing your flash off of is the color that comes back. So if I were to back up to this map and I were to bounce off of this map, it would be more blue-green as a result. If I were to bounce off of my hat, it would be red light as a result. So when I was in a warm room and I was bouncing off of the walls, it was this like bright orange color that was coming back. It was like this very warm flash color, which would have been great if it had not been for the videographer. So this could have helped to counterbalance it in that situation a little bit. Unfortunately, it's kind of a trial and error thing. And now I'm gonna talk about how to use gel lights on your camera, because there is a trick to doing it where your images don't turn out all wackadoo. So I'm gonna turn my flash on, I'm gonna turn my camera on. I almost always shoot in auto white balance. I do, it's fine. I have editors, I have editing programs. I just don't have issues using auto white balance at all. However, when you're using gels, you want to specifically override it, because it is always going to think that your flash color is going to be about 6500. It just is. So you're going to want to go into your white balance in that situation and play with the custom Kelvin settings. It says that it's taking the flash from 6500 to 3200, and almost every single gel is going to have that information on there. This says it's taking my flash from 6500K to 3800K. So in theory, I could go to my custom white balance setting, go into Kelvin. What does this one say? This one says 3200. I could shoot with the color temperature as 3200, and theoretically what happens is that it ends up looking in camera as a more neutral color as a result. I typically find that I have to compensate a little bit more. I usually go down to 2500 or 2700K, and I feel like that looks more neutral to me. I don't know if the gels are lying, or if it's just that my flash is a slightly warmer color temperature, or if it's what I'm bouncing off of, but I typically make it a little bit cooler than what it says to make it, and that usually ends up being okay. This is an example from a wedding where this is all ambient lighting, everything is ambient, and this is what it looks like without a gelled flash. This is another example where it probably would have been helpful for me to put on, maybe not one of the strongest gels, but they do come with like minor corrections. This one goes from 6500 to 4600. This potentially could have been a thing that would have made my background turn bright red a little bit less. Using some of these weaker gels is a great option whenever you just want to change the lighting a little bit to match the ambient lighting in the room and not end up with lighting that is as overall even as this image, or as overall even as this image. If you want to experiment with gels but legitimately like the look of having things warm in the background, I'm with you. I think using some of the weaker gels is a great way to do that. All that being said, I legitimately like the look of not using gels. I don't mind that people in the background sort of fade out and become warmer as it goes. I legitimately believe that by us adding our cool tone lighting, it brings out by contrast the warmth of rooms, and that's something that I'm really looking for. And I know that I mentioned this recently, but one of the things that I'm looking for whenever I'm shooting are opportunities for the lighting to feel the way that love feels. And I feel like love feels warm and cozy, and I feel like cool lighting doesn't feel as romantic and warm and cozy. Like candle lighting that's perfectly balanced to not be a warmish red color feels like a waste to me. Like I want that warmth whenever I look at those images. I legitimately enjoy shooting receptions where my flash is contrasting with the backgrounds. I feel like it creates interesting fall off and interesting contrast. And I'll especially never use gels whenever I'm doing things like direct flash, which is a tutorial that I'm going to get into because clients are requesting it now. I've never had clients specifically ask for a specific type of reception lighting, but this past year everybody wants direct flash. So we are going to talk about direct flash in another video. Thank you guys so much for voting on this topic. I'm really glad that some people came back and were like, no, please talk about the gels. Like, please come back and talk about them. Even though they're not really a big part of my workflow, just by having this conversation with you today, I realized that I just need to suck it up and buy some from the Goddix. I found some on Amazon, so I'm definitely gonna get some because as I was looking through those images, specifically this reception that I really wanted to show you, I was like, you know, really need to bring gels to every wedding because they really are a problem-solving tool that you don't really know that you're gonna need them until you're in that situation. So I really hope those examples help, but if you have any questions at all, definitely let me know. Again, I'm gonna link you to how I use Bounce Flash. The way that I would use gels as Bounce Flash is going to be the exact same as how I would normally do it. The only difference is that I manually change my white balance settings whenever I'm using gels so that it looks more normal and I have an easier time color correcting in post. So if you haven't checked that video out, definitely do it because I know you guys are big lighting nerds like me and I appreciate it. Gels are really inexpensive, easy to play with, and they're really beneficial for color correcting. So I hope you guys will play with them. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting me. I am starting to come out of a little bit of seasonal depression, I think I'm getting better. And it means a lot that you are here listening and asking questions, and it means a lot to me. So thank you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye. Je suis la jeune fille. Yes, that's French they're speaking, and no, those children aren't French. They're American. They learned it with Muzzy. That is forever, eternally burned into my brain.